All right, take your Bible or your phone or your tablet and open with me to the Gospel of John, the 13th chapter. I was just thinking, this should be ideal for a lot of folks, because when I walk through the Walmart parking lot, their Bible's already in their car. So all you got to do is reach in the back seat, blow the dust off, and we'll be ready to go. John chapter 13. Take just a second, and those that are on Facebook Live this morning, apologize. The Facebook Live is going in and out on us. We are just at the edge of our internet signal. We worked so hard on making sure that transmitter worked here in the parking lot, but didn't even really put a lot of effort and thought into the internet part of it. But, so we've got something else to work on before next Sunday. John chapter 13. Some of you will remember that probably 6 months ago, right before Christmas, I had been preaching through the Gospel of John, and then Christmas came, and then we went off on the side road for a little ways and spent some weeks in Nehemiah. Then Corona came, and that's kind of brought me back to this passage this morning in John chapter 13, the first two verses there that we see, what we're going to look at, and I want us to look at it with this thought in our minds. What motivates us to serve? What motivates us to actually serve God? And we're going to look at Jesus and his model, and I think here in this passage we see three things in his dealing with the disciples that are examples from his life. And chapter 13 begins really the last section in the Gospel of John. The first 12 chapters have more or less been public ministry. He's been out and he's been talking about and revealing himself and who he is, the living water, the bread of life, and been doing those things. And now beginning in chapter 13, we're into the last few days of the life of Christ, and he's going to spend his time more focused on the disciples themselves. Much of what we're going to be looking at, if you read the rest of the Gospel of John from here, you're almost eavesdropping. You're really, in many places, kind of having the opportunity. John is sharing with us what those kind of final words of Jesus and what he taught them in preparing them for his departure. And so that's kind of the backdrop of what we're going to be looking at here this morning. And you're probably familiar with the passage. Even though I'm only going to look at two verses, I need to kind of jump ahead just a little bit. Actually, I need to start by going backwards. If we take Mark and Luke, and line things up with the Gospel of John, what we find is that the disciples had been having an argument over who was going to be the most important, who was going to be the right-hand man when Jesus set up his earthly kingdom. If you remember, the disciples, the kind of the thought then was, they never, even were days from the crucifixion, they never in the wildest dreams thought Christ was going to be crucified. They were thinking he was going to set up an earthly kingdom, and so they were jockeying for position to see who was going to be what the pecking order was going to be in this new kingdom. And so that was kind of, they were all, if you've ever worked in a place where maybe everybody knew there was a promotion coming up, and people started doing a little extra and working a little harder and trying to make points with the boss and that kind of thing to get that promotion. That's kind of what the disciples were doing. and that was kind of what was motivating them. They were being motivated by this idea of moving up in the kingdom. And in the middle of that, as they're having that, even days from the crucifixion, they still don't realize what's going on. They're having this argument. And in the middle of that, Jesus comes and washes their feet. And from that story, we're going to see what stimulated Jesus to service. We're talking a lot about stimulus packages in our society today. Well, let's talk about what stimulated, what caused Jesus to serve. What caused him to do the things that he did. What we see when we look in this passage there in beginning in verse 13, it says to us, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him." There's three things in those two verses, I think, that reveal to us the heart of Jesus Christ. If we want to be like Jesus, we need to know what his heart was. And so the three things as we look at this passage that I think motivated, stimulated Jesus to service. Jesus certainly wasn't like the disciples. He wasn't trying to move up in the kingdom. He knew what was coming, and yet he was motivated by these three things. And these three things should still motivate the Church of Jesus Christ, should still motivate believers even today. The first thing that you notice in that verse is in that first verse when Jesus says that he knew, the Bible says, John says, Jesus knew that his hour had come. If you remember, earlier in the Gospel of John, Mary had come, his mother, at the wedding, had come to Jesus and said to him, they're out of wine. We need some wine for the wedding. And Jesus said, it's not my time, it's not my hour. This hour always referred, in the story of Christ, it always refers to his crucifixion. And so back at the wedding, he said, it's not my hour. But here in this verse, in verse 1, he says he knew that his hour had come. He knew that his hour had come. In other words, he knew what time it was. Jesus, we figure out in this passage, as we look at it, the first thing that I notice here is that he acknowledged the situation. He acknowledged the situation. He looked around him and he stuck his finger up and he saw the way the winds were blowing, and he knew that it was leading him just days to the cross, just days from dying for our sin. And because of that, he said, I'm going to teach my disciples what they need to know. Folks, if the Church of Jesus Christ has ever been motivated by the situation, April the 26th or the spring of 2020 most certainly should be that time. If we can't look around and see the need for the church to be the church, in the world we live in the time we're in, that it is time for Christians, that the need has never been stronger. There are a lot of people around us, and the vast majority of people around us who are scared to death. There are people who don't know what the future holds. They don't know physically about their health. They don't know about their job. They don't know. Some of them have children and family that work in healthcare and emergency services, and they're scared for them. And they're scared more than ever. We need a church that steps forward and says, "Listen, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow." Listen, Jesus was aware of the situation. He looked around him and he saw what was going on. And he said, it's time. Again, we're from the rest of this book, for the rest of the Gospel of John, he's going to be preparing his disciples, getting them ready to serve, to do the work after he has ascended. He knew what time it was. Folks, the church desperately today needs to wake up and realize what time it is. We're not going back to the old normal. Not in our church, not in our nation. We're not going back to the old normal. Things are different. They will never be the same. You'll never look at a doorknob the same way. Listen, I know from spending 3 weeks in China, while we were there, and we've been warned about the germs and everything else over there, and ever since I got back, I'm turning into my grandma. I'm turning into a germaphobe. I look at buggy handles differently. I look at doorknobs differently. I watch folks to see when they wash their hands. I watch the waitress in the restaurant to see if she takes, I'm going to make some of you real nervous. I watch her to see if she takes that jug of water or tea, and if she touches my glass with it, I don't want that water. She's been touching every glass in the building. I want her to hold it up here and aim at the glass. I got conscious of that. And now, 15 years later, and folks, we're not going to go through something like we're going through, and this world might be a different world. And the church needs to be aware of that and realize that people are hurting and need to hear the gospel. You know what people need right now? The government's talking about we need a vaccine. We need tracing and tracking. What people need right now is the good news and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they're not going to hear it anywhere but from us. That should motivate us as believers, that we are looking at the situation, that we are aware of what's going on in our society, that we're aware of the fear and the hurt around us. It is a marvelous opportunity for us to be able to tell people about Jesus Christ. When people say to you, when you're out in the grocery store, you're out, doing the things that you do, and someone says to you, aren't you afraid? Aren't you scared? No, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not scared. I'm aware. I try to be careful, but I'm not afraid because I trust Christ. We've got to be aware of the situation. Jesus knew the hour, and it motivated him to be the follower, to do the will. Over and over again, he said, I'm here to do the will of the Father. Not only we see that he was aware of the situation, but then if you continue to read, if you look at that as it goes on, it says that it talks about his followers. If you look in that next verse, or continue in that first verse, it says he loved his own, and he loved them till the end. Jesus was not only aware of the situation, but he had an affection for the saints. He loved people. He loved his disciples. He loved those men that God had given him. He loved them, in fact, so much, just like he loved you and I, that earlier in the Gospel of John, God reminds us that he loved us so much that he gave his only begotten Son. Listen, what ought to motivate us as believers, what ought to motivate us as children of God, as a church, is the love we have for other people. Listen, the Bible commands it. It doesn't always command us to like them, but it does command us to love them. We are told to love them. And our love for man, listen, I joked a while ago, I said we'll blow the horn and we'll wake up the Jehovah's Witnesses across the street. But you know what? We ought to love them anyway, to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. It ought to motivate us to go out and to see the hungry, to see the homeless, that our heart is broken by those that are around us, that we are, that the love of Christ in us should motivate us and drive us to be more like Christ. And it says here, he loved them
till the end. Have you ever read the Gospels? The disciples weren't always a lovable bunch. Have you ever looked in the mirror? We are not always a lovable bunch. Sometimes, even in the church, we're mean and rotten and nasty. Now, I know that may be a shock for some of you. How many of you know sometimes the church is mean and rotten and nasty? Okay, some of you have experienced it. But you know what? We're told to love them anyway. We're told to carry the love of Jesus Christ. The Bible again reminds us that, and tells us that the world will know that whether or not we love Him by how we love each other. You know what God just did in that verse? God gave everybody in this community, He gave the people that ride up and down the road the right to judge us. To judge us by how we love, by how we care, by how we meet the needs of those around us. Listen, we have an opportunity as Christians right now to be more the church than we ever have. Some of us, some people are thinking, you know, we're not able to have church. What do you mean we're not able to have church? Really? We are the church. What do you mean we can't have the church? We are the church. We take the church with us everywhere we go. We ought to have church when we go to the grocery store. We ought to have church when we're at Walmart. We ought to be out showing the love of Jesus Christ more now than we ever have. Now, you might have to do it from 6 feet away. You might not be able to shake their hand, but we ought to be able to show the love of God. Jesus was motivated by that affection. Jesus was motivated because He was aware of the hour. And the third thing in this passage, and one that is probably more timely now than it has ever been, in the second verse, it says to us there, and supper being ended, the devil having now put into the head the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray Him. The third thing that motivated Jesus Christ, that certainly should be motivating the church today. Again, first He was aware of the situation. He knew what the hour was. He knew what the hour was. His affection for the saints. He demonstrated the love of God. Even to those who in a few days would rip His beard out by the roots, who would crown a crown of thorns on His head, who would drive the nails in His hands and feet. He showed them love. And then the third thing that motivated Jesus was an acknowledgement, an awareness of the slanderer. An awareness of the slanderer. Jesus was acutely aware of the work of Satan. Satan's called a lot of things. One of the names that I like for him is the slanderer. That's one of his main tools. He loves to slander. He has slandered Jesus all through His ministry. He has slandered Jesus. He will slander Jesus in front of Pilate. He's going to slander Jesus all through His ministry. But Jesus was aware of the work of Satan. He's been aware of him all along. Listen, Judas didn't catch Jesus by surprise. The Roman guards didn't shock Jesus when they came to the garden to arrest Him. He was expecting them. The Bible says that He didn't take His life, but He gave His life. He was aware of the handiwork of Satan. I want to remind you this morning, as you know, as probably many of you have said or had someone say to you. Someone has said something like, man, have you ever seen anything like this in your life? Well, of course not. Unless you're old enough to remember the 1918 flu. You don't remember anything like this in your life. None of us do. And we look at it, and we have all kinds of opinions. Was it a conspiracy? There are a lot of different ideas about what's going on in our time right now. Let me tell you what's going on. I'm not a politician. I'm not the son of a politician. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. But I do know this. What is at work right now is Satan. Satan is the ultimate root behind all the virus, the division, the confusion that we're living in right now. He is the ultimate, the base of it, the foundation of it, the root of it. He is behind it all. Satan is a divider. He is a murderer. The Bible says he seeks whom he may devour. The Bible says he's a liar, a thief, a killer, a murderer. Look around us. Can you think of anything that is suiting Satan any more than to see these numbers that continue to climb of death, of businesses closing, of churches that are closing? That there is nothing that suits him anymore. And he is reveling in his handiwork. He is reveling in what's going on. And what that should do to the child of God is that should motivate us. That should be the gas in our spiritual engine that causes us, if Satan is roaring and roaming, seeking whom he may devour, then the Lion of Judah needs to be amplified. It needs to be raised up. As children of God, in the face of Satan's handiwork all around us, it should motivate us to more than ever, as the old psalm says, to stand up for Jesus. Listen, we live in a world that, again, the confusion, the division, the death, the destruction. Where else can you place the blame for that? That is exactly the tools and the way Satan works. And so the harder that Satan works to divide, destroy, murder, kill, then the more the Church of Jesus Christ should be motivated to stand up and to serve Him. Listen, we ought to be doubly in tune. We ought to be working twice as hard. Listen, that the church doors may be closed. We may not be able to gather. We may not be able to do the things that some of the things that the church ordinarily does. But folks, we can go out in our community. We can go out in our neighborhood. We can stand up. We can live like Jesus called us to live. We can be the example. We can stand up because we know. Listen, the more, I think back, I've heard people compare our current situation to World War II. Some of you are old enough to maybe barely remember some of that. You've read in the history books how back in the day, if you remember what the Japanese admiral said after they bombed Pearl Harbor, one of the Japanese leaders, and I'm not going to get this quote exactly right, but he said, "I fear we've only awakened a sleeping giant." You know what happened in the United States after they bombed Pearl Harbor? A nation that was divided, a nation that was, I don't know exactly the division, 50-50, some wanting to get involved in World War II, some wanting to stay out. But after they bombed Pearl Harbor, the United States, the people of this nation, they came together. And our factories that once turned out cars began to turn out airplanes. And the women of this nation, they stepped forward. They began to sew and make uniforms, and work in plants, and produce bombs and planes and tanks. When the enemy raised the stakes, the good men and women, the greatest generation, they stepped up. And we sent our young men, we sent them by the multiplied thousands onto the battlefield. We sent them to Germany, we sent them to Europe, we sent them all over, and they did their job. Why? Because the enemy had attacked. As long as the war was overseas, the United States didn't get too much involved. But when they poked the bear, when they dropped the bombs, when they attacked our ships and our young men and women at Pearl Harbor, this nation came together as she never had before. Probably never has since. Folks, that's what the church ought to be doing today. We've been attacked. We've been attacked. We live in a world right now where the ABC stores can be open, the abortion clinics are open. You get arrested for walking down the sidewalk praying in front of an abortion clinic, and the church doors are closed. The church needs to be stepping up and saying we've been attacked. The enemy has showed his ugly face, and we as believers need to stand up. We need to unite. We need to be stronger than we ever have. We need to commit ourselves like we never have to serving Jesus Christ. You don't have to be in a church. You don't have to have an altar. Oh, Lane, just to start playing something softly this morning. Right there in your car. Right where you are. I ask you just to bow your head in your car. You don't have to be again at an altar. You don't have to be in a church. You don't have to have on your Sunday finest. So you sit in your car and say, Lord, this morning, here in the parking lot, in what may be the most unusual church service I've ever been part of, I want to commit myself to serve you. God, I look at the clock. I look at the hour. I know that the days are short. Folks, the sun's coming up right over there in the east. Any day, any moment, I believe we can see Jesus coming through those clouds. And we'd be gone. I believe our time is short. You believe that? I believe our days are numbered. I believe God's at work in our society and our world right now. I believe our days are numbered. I'm not a clock setter. I'm not a date setter. I do know this. It's 24 hours closer than it was yesterday this time. And our Lord is coming. And our friends and neighbors, they're going to die lost. They're going to slip off into an eternity in a devil's hell if we don't get serious about serving Jesus. Not only do I see the hour, but if we truly love Him, we're going to be concerned about their eternal destiny. We're going to be concerned about their relationship with Jesus Christ. Not only do I see the hour, not only do I know we ought to love Him, but I look around and I see Satan at work. And can I tell you something? That just makes me mad. It just angers me to see what Satan's up to. You know, most of you know I like Jerry Clower. I love his stories. He tells one about playing football. Played football at Mississippi State. And he said one time the coach told him, said, go out there and just hit anybody in a different colored uniform than yours. That's kind of the attitude we ought to take as believers. Satan's in a different uniform. He's against us. He's opposed. We ought to be committed as never before to serving Him. But you know, I can't, to be honest with you, I can't tell who. I don't know who's sitting in these cars. I've moved around some and I recognize some cars. I don't know who all's sitting out there this morning. Maybe God brought you here and put you in this parking lot today to remind you that the hour is at hand. The time is short. We're not promised tomorrow. We're not promised this evening. You know, you could be, one of us could very well be the next corona statistic. As I said, Jesus could part those eastern skies. I want to ask you this morning, do you realize the hour is at hand? Do you know Jesus Christ personally? Do you know Him as your Savior? I am going to tell you a little bit of the story. For those of you who don't know why we're here the way we are, just real quickly, we didn't have the equipment, I didn't think, to be able to do this with. And I didn't want to spend the money on it because I thought this wouldn't last real long. And so we just do the Facebook and we go on that way. But I got to thinking about a big old box of stuff that I accumulated probably 6-8 months ago. Been sitting out there in the gym in a box in the corner in the kitchen. The women kicking it, complaining because they had to work around it. I got to thinking about that box. I wonder what's in that box. I didn't even know what all I'd got. Got to looking at it. And all we needed was that one little thing hanging right there on that post. I'd seen them advertised everywhere. FM transmitters, the way you're listening to us, for $150, $175. I decided I don't want to have to spend that and use it for a few weeks and go back. And lo and behold, I just monkeyed around. Let me tell you about that thing. I found it on the internet, and either I misread it or there was a misprint. Because I thought it said it had a range of 100 feet. So I went and bought it, $25. That's how much it cost us. Brought it in here and I sat out in the fellowship building and unwrapped the package, began to read the instructions. And lo and behold, there on the package, it didn't say it had a range of 100 feet. It said it had a range of 10 feet. I started to put it back in the box and carry it back and get my money. And I told Caleb, I said, no, let's try. So we plugged it in the CD player and he got in my car and rode off down the edge of the parking lot. And we come back and he said, it works. I can hear you all the way to the parking lot. All the way to the road. It's not perfect. But God put all that together. My misreading of the 10 feet or 100. I'd have never bought it if I thought it had 10 feet. And I thought it had 100 feet. I'd have never bought it if it had been much more than $25. We got to looking in that box, had several $1,000s worth of wireless mics that we're using that have been given to me. Just so we could be here today. Just so we could be here, so you could be here today. You're here today and you don't know Jesus Christ. I want to tell you something. God started 8 months ago putting it together so you'd be here today and you'd hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Just so you could have the opportunity to ask Him into your heart. Just so you could have the chance to be saved. Right there in your car, all you've got to do is kneel, bow your head, and simply ask Christ to forgive you for your sins and to come into your heart. Come into your life and to forgive you and be your Savior. God put a lot of effort in getting you here this morning. Some of you are probably scared even to be here like this. But something motivated you and came anyway. You might be listening on Facebook Live today. You might see this recorded later on YouTube. Same thing. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter how you hear. The only fact is, the only thing is if you hear. Let's pray. Father, we thank you this morning for allowing us to gather in this parking lot. God, I can't see them through the windshields. I can't see who's sitting in the cars. God, you know who's here. God, you know who you brought here. You know why. God, there are Christians here that need to be motivated, that need to be stirred, that need to be challenged to serve you. God, there's quite likely somebody sitting in one of these cars, somebody who's going to be watching by the internet, God, who needs to hear the gospel, who needs to know you personally. God, we pray that you'd stir their hearts. God, that you would challenge them, convict them, that they'll come to know Christ. God, we thank you for what you're going to do. I thank you for each person in these videos. God, I thank you that they took the time for this unusual service and come out. God, now as we leave this parking lot, God, let us remember that just because there's a virus, just because we can't go into church doors, doesn't mean we can't serve you. God, go with us as we leave. Bless each person. God, again, I want to thank you. I want to thank Archie. I want to thank Lane for all the hard work. I want to thank Tommy sitting over here, God, who spent time last night on a Saturday night digging through boxes of cables. God, I want to thank you for the men who came early today to park cars. God, I just want to thank you for making this happen. God, it's so good. God, it's so good to be gathered even like this. God, we pray your will will be done. We'll give you the honor for it all. For it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I think I like that better than amen. All right, a couple things as we leave. Right now, unless you hear differently, we'll be back here next week at 10 o'clock. I can tell you right now, if this goes on too long, we're going to be meeting earlier. Those fat preachers don't like preaching in the sunlight. It gets hot up here. And so, unless something changes, we will plan on being back here next Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. Again, remind you, we've got videos on Facebook and YouTube, our webpage. If you haven't done it, if you will go, whatever, Google or iPhone, either one, if you will go to the store, the Google store or the Apple store, and you will search for an app called the Share Faith app. When you download that app, when you download it, it's going to ask you to choose your church. If you will tell it PGBC, type that in, it'll pull up, that's what it'll pull up, PGBC Concord. When you tell it that's your church, choose the icon. When you do, that app's going to download, and on that app, you will have access right there to all of our videos that we put out. You'll have access to practically every sermon I've preached in the last probably 5 years. We'll be able to send you messages through that app. It's kind of a work in progress. You'll be able to send your tithe in through that app. You can do that that way. And so it's really a cool app. I know what the Bible says about pride, but I'm really proud of that app. It's pretty cool. I've had too much time on my hands in quarantine. So that app is really awesome. It'll really help. If we get everybody on it, to help us really be connected. Again, I can click a few buttons and send messages out through it real quick. You can read the Bible there. If you get lost, there's a map on it. And so it's really a cool app. I think you'll enjoy. And so remember that. As we dismiss this morning, I'm going to ask you to follow the yellow brick road. All right? I don't, where they all at? I see a couple of them. We're going to start on the back row and go one row at a time. And you might as well get used to this, because probably when you go back to church and we're able to gather again, we're going to have to do that because to keep the social distancing, we're not just going to be able to let everybody go out in the mob. So you might as well start practicing now. If you will, if you just back up and then follow this little road right here, just peel off and loop around behind the church and go out on the other side. It's much easier to get out over there in a group. As you go out, several of you have asked about your offering. Again, we're not allowed to approach the cars, but y'all ever seen them at the big crusades have a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket for the offering? Well, we got more faith than that. We got a 5-gallon bucket. Anyway, they're over there. If you want to throw, if you've been holding on to your offering and had to send them in, you want to get them in, they're over there around the mailbox somewhere. So when you loop around the church, they're over there. You can throw your offering in the bucket. I've watched Highway Patrol come past here 3 times now. That's more than they come by here in a month. I don't know what they're doing. Tell them to stop. Turn the radio to 107.3. Glad you're here. Again, see you next Sunday. Drive safe. Please leave carefully. I said back up and just loop around behind the church. I like that. All right. Thank y'all. Let them go, Clark.